Well, was that nice? Thank you, and thank you, Elder Pennick. How about that? So, thank you for our choir back in a new season after the summer off. Hopefully you received somewhere coming in. If you didn't, you can get it on the way out. The final reading of our nominating committee report. And we thank the committee, John Krell and Joanne Wall and all the others who went like 7 or 8 weeks, meeting every week. So we're not going to read it all. You have it in your hand, or you can get it on the way out. We would just like to vote it today. Is there a motion that we would accept the nominating committee report for the next 2 years? Is the ministry in our church? Okay, a second? I need a second from somebody. Second. All right, there we go. So all in favor of having these people serve our church for the next 2 years, would you raise your hands? And give them a hand. How about that? That's you. And we will do a dedication in a little bit for that. I was driving down through the La Sierra area of Riverside here a few days ago, and I was just dumbfounded to drive by Elder Pennick's house. And as I drove by, I was just shocked because he was out there in his yard on his hands and knees, and he was eating grass. And I stopped and said, Gerald, what are you doing? And then I got home. I turned on the news, and they had a picture at the White House, and here out on the lawn was President Obama, and he was out on the grass, and he was eating grass. And then the next story, it was over in Russia, and here was President Putin, and he was eating grass. And would you believe it? At the end of the show, the Pope was here visiting, and they found a Pope out on a field of grass, eating grass. And the worst of it was, somehow against my will, I was led out to the backyard, and pretty soon I was eating grass. But that's something like what happened in the Bible. And we believe that the Bible is pretty clear. Nebuchadnezzar is all of us. Can you accept that? There's a little bit of Nebuchadnezzar in all of us. C.S. Lewis says, pride is the first sin. It is the worst sin. It leads to all the other sins. And he said it's the one sin that somehow we can see in everyone else but can't see in ourselves. They're pride. They talk too long. They do, and it's in us. And the Bible's pretty clear. There will be no pride in heaven. Pride is what started it all. And so God has to make sure that we don't go down this road again, pride. So we're starting a new series on the 7 deadly sins. Does that make you want to come to church the next 7 weeks? The 7 deadly sins. I think we'll have some fun with it. I hope you'll learn something from it. It's something I'm learning, reading books, and there's a lot out there on the 7 deadly sins. And we're starting off this one on the story of pride. God finds these little ways to come into our own story and deal with our pride. So rather than dealing with all of you, I said, I'll use pastor stories, all right? So there was a lady came up to the pastor after church and said, I hope it didn't bother you that my husband got up and left right during your sermon. And the pastor said, well, it did sort of distract me. And she said, well, don't worry about him. He's been walking in his sleep since he was 12 years old. Little pricks to our pride. I was preaching in Chicago, a few hundred people there, big church, and thought I was doing relatively well and preached a good, strong sermon. Lady came up to me, a visitor, mother of one of our members, and she had heard me mention Dr. Jack Provenza, big professor at Loma Linda for many, many years, and she said, Pastor Dan, I knew Jack Provenza. You are no Jack Provenza. I came to last year, my first Sabbath. Elder Pennant called me to come. I was still at Chicago, but flew out for 1 week, scared to death. All of a sudden now I'm going to this college church, and a lot of people hadn't been coming, just a few hundred coming out of 2,000 some. And how would they judge me, and how would they feel about me as their new pastor on one 25-minute sermon? So I did the best I could, preached my heart out, came down the door, many people coming out the door, new members welcoming me, shaking my hand. One lady comes out the door, nice-looking lady, husband, and she said, "Can you go back to Chicago?" Why would you say that? It's a knife in my heart. Well, it turns out her husband was the new president of the hospital in Chicago, and she wanted me to go back where I just came from. It was a compliment. But for 2 minutes, I was about destroyed. And just to repeat this one, for those of you that weren't here when I told it in the past, it's an old joke, real quick, about the pastor's wife who told her husband that she had one secret in the house. She had a little box that he hadn't seen. He spent the whole next weekend when she was gone looking for the box, found the box, inside $2,000 and 3 eggs. Remember this one? Said to, when she came back, she said, "Honey, I found the box. I don't want there to be any secrets. And I'm thrilled about the 2,000, but why the 3 eggs? Well, honey, you're a good preacher, but whenever the sermons weren't so good, I put 1 egg in the box." Well, out of 20 years, 3 eggs, okay, he could live with that. And where'd the $2,000 come from? Well, whenever I had a dozen eggs, I sold them. Not easy. My first year last year, I was the new pastor on the block. They invited me to speak for Easter. Up on top of Mount Rubidoux, the mountain there in Riverside, they have a cross up there. They broadcast it on KSGN radio, and they said, "Pastor Dan, you will have 2,500 people there listening to you, plus the radio." And so I got up at 3 in the morning to go up there, and we drove up there, and all the people hiked up there, pouring down rain. All the choir sitting there covered by plastic, and someone was holding on my Bible under the rain. When I got up to preach, there was an umbrella hold over me, and thousands of people just walking away because couldn't stand the rain anymore. And here I am trying to preach my heart out, and just groups of people leaving at the same time. The time I was done, there was only maybe 100 people there in the rain, my own church members who were too embarrassed to leave. Difficult. And you think, well, maybe I'm not so great after all. Went to India. We're going to the same church here in a few months. Another guy and I had worked together to build a 3,000-seat college church there. And I flew 10,000 miles or 12,000 to preach this one sermon to dedicate that church. Big crowd of people. They went a long time, dedicated all kinds of stuff, a couple hours before I even got up. Finally, I get up, and about 10 minutes into the sermon, the sound system dies. And I thought, no problem, Dan, we have a generator. So we waited a couple minutes, generator didn't come. We thought, we better just talk. The generator never happened because the guy running the generator went away to get a cup of chai tea. And while I am speaking, no one could hear a word. It's 1:30 already. You can smell the lunch outside, and people are just getting up in large groups and walking out. And your pride takes a hit. Not easy. I collected a few stories on pride. You've all heard the old one. Hillary and Bill Clinton and Al Gore came up to the White to God in heaven. Remember this? God is sitting there, and he says, "Bill, what have you done that I should give you a place here?" And Bill says, "I was president. I had a foundation. I worked on AIDS and many things." Good enough. You can sit on my right. He asked Al Gore, "What have you done?" "Well, I was vice president, and I made a movie about environment, and I did a lot of things." "Okay, you can be on my left." And he said, "Hillary, what have you done?" Hillary says, "God, I think you're sitting in my chair." This desire that we have to sit there. Someone, they printed a book by Joe Namath, a football quarterback. And he said, "I can't wait till tomorrow because I get better looking every day." Title of his book. Pride. Vince Lombardi, do you know this one? Famous coach of the Green Bay Packers, won 2 Super Bowls, the first Super Bowls. He won a Super Bowl. They're having a party late at night, and finally, late at night, in the middle of winter, he comes home. After all the celebration, he just won a Super Bowl. And he's full of himself. He doesn't want to wake up his wife, and so he just slips into bed real quiet, but his feet touched her. And she says, "God, your feet are cold." And he said, "While we're here in bed, you can call me Vince." Did you get it? You don't have to call me God. Pride. Don Shula was the coach of the Miami Dolphins, won 17 games in a row, undefeated, won a Super Bowl. Middle of winter in the off season, he and his wife walked into a movie theater to watch a movie. They were the last ones there, just a few people in there. But when he walked in, they all cheered. And he said, "Honey, I'm shocked that they even know me in here." He said to the guy sitting next to him, I said, "I'm surprised that you recognize me." He said, "Should I know you?" He said, "They don't show the movie until we have 10 people here, and you and your wife were the last 2 to make 10. Pride. We're sick people, pastors too. How many times I'll be doing something that's going pretty well, giving a Bible study, and it's just anointed, and you're doing good, or you're doing a mission trip, or you're preaching, and it's working. And there's a little voice in your head, a little Vince Scully radio announcer will say, "That's very good. You're doing great. Now keep it." And they're commenting on you, trying to get you to be proud. And you have to fight the demons off. Somebody asked C.S. Lewis, "You're probably the most famous, most published Christian writer maybe in history. How do you deal with that fame?" He said, "One can't be too careful not to think about such things." How do you fight that off? C.S. Lewis wrote a chapter in Screwtape Letters. And he said someone had become humble. He said, what do you do when someone becomes humble? Help them become proud of their humility. As soon as you begin to say, "I think I'm becoming humble," now you've lost it. And you have to start all over again. How to deal with pride and humility. Anyway, our story for today is in Daniel chapters 4 and 5. The famous story of Nebuchadnezzar. It says in chapter 5, Nebuchadnezzar's heart became arrogant and hardened with pride. He was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. And you remember the verse, as he stood there looking out over his palace and over his kingdom there in Babylon, great empire. "Is not this the great Babylon that I have built as the royal palace, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" And immediately what had been said was fulfilled, and he was driven away from people and ate grass like cattle. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. And then finally, after the 7 years, he says, "I praised the Most High, and I honored and glorified him who lives forever." And very quickly, let's just take some points as we get into this subject. Number one, the deadly sins are deadly. How brilliant is that? You came to church to hear that? The deadly sins are deadly. What happened here to Nebuchadnezzar will happen to everyone who holds on to pride. Eventually, long enough, it'll happen to everyone. It'll eat away at your soul. Please understand as we do this series, the problem with the 7 deadly sins is not that now it makes God mad and he will kill you. They have the power to kill you by themselves. And they eat away at your soul over time. You look here in the book of Daniel as you see these 2 tracks. Daniel and his 3 friends, they refuse to eat the king's food. They're 10 times better. The king walks in, Daniel walks in, and the king says, "I hear that you're able to interpret these dreams." And Daniel, "Not me. No, not me. There is a God in heaven who can tell you what's about to come." Over and over again, Daniel's friends stand for God. They refuse to bow down. And God honors them incredibly. But Daniel always gave the credit to God. On the other side is Daniel 4. Nebuchadnezzar in his pride ends up eating grass for 7 years. Belshazzar in all his pride, drinking out of the golden cup stolen from the temple and his handwriting on the wall. You think you're doing pretty well, but tell you tonight, you are weighed in the balances and found wanting. And that night, they all lost their power. Over time, those who get rid of pride and are humble, God will honor. And those who hold on to pride will have their soul eaten away, and they will die and end up like Nebuchadnezzar. Deadly sins will kill you if you don't kill them. Number 2, this isn't all of us. Every time we tell a story and add a little, there's pride. Every time we look in the mirror too long. Every time we worry about how we look. Every time we're jealous of somebody. Every time we have a hard time apologizing and getting that word out. We used to work with one of our sons years ago. Just could never say it. We finally had to practice, just, I was wrong. Come on, wrong. Just say it. I'm sorry. I messed up. Every time it's hard for us. Every time we had grades and you said to someone else, what did you get? Hoping that they would ask you what you got, and then you could be proud. Every time that you're proud that you're tall, or that you're blonde, or something you had nothing to do with. Or if you're proud that you're an American, or proud that you keep the right day, these things can be okay, or they can cross the line and they become proud. Every time you criticize someone because you think we know better. Every time we have too much jewelry, or cars, or house, or degrees after our name, or whatever it is, pride sneaks in. And there's the other side. Anytime you feel down on yourself, even the people who have low self-esteem, that is also pride, because now you're worried about yourself and what you think about yourself. Pride is in all of us, or little Nebuchadnezzar in every single one of us. Even as pastors, not Gerald, but maybe the rest of us, we can talk about how many baptisms. Did you ever talk about how many members in your conference? The 70,000? Remember that? Reaching for 70,000. We compare with the other conferences. What's our liquidity? How many members in your church? How many people are coming? Where have you traveled recently? What books have you written? What books have you read? Pride. It's a wonder you let us even pastor a church. We can talk about what God is doing, but we're really trying to sneak a little pride in for ourselves along the way. For 14 some years, I was introduced all over the world, Pastor Dan, senior pastor of the La Sierra University Church. And there came a point I said, I better break this thing that pretty soon that becomes who you are. Pride. Every Friday night, you may think after 40 years it would go away, but every Friday night there are the demons. No one's going to like this. No one's going to get any good out of this. They're going to hate it. They're going to find out that you're a fraud after all and just send you away. And they're going to send you over to Needles or to Blythe or somewhere else. And you have to fight the demons away. We're a hairpiece for 20 years. Why would I do that? Pride, worried about what people would think. We're sick people. Pride. Number 3, there will be no pride in heaven. If just one person tried to sneak in a little slice of pride into heaven, into the new earth, then we would have all this all over again. It's all it took was one person with pride, and that's what we got for the rest of eternity here. September 11th, and bombs, and anthrax, and landmines, and kids starving, and cancer, all because of one person's pride thousands of years ago. And that's why pride is such a big deal to God. He says, I hate pride. And he has this war on pride, and he goes to Nebuchadnezzar and says, I'm going to do something to break this cycle of pride. And every one of us will have to have every slice of pride taken out of us if we're going to be in the kingdom. In the book of Revelation, it is very clear we are to come out from the city of Babylon. What does Babylon stand for? Anytime we have pride, look at this city that I have built. Anytime we begin to have pride and we begin to think, I have something to contribute to my salvation, you have to say, come out of Babylon. There will be no pride that will go into heaven. We will all be all Jesus. The Bible says the last message about the world, go around the world, will be, come out of Babylon, fear God and give glory where? To Him. He is the Alpha and the Omega. It is only Jesus. If there's anything of us in there, we will not be there. Pride will be gone. There cannot be any pride in heaven. Or God cannot take a chance that we would do all of this over again. We will be absolutely dependent on Him. In Him we live and move and have our being. Acts 17:28. Is there a legitimate form of pride? Yes, there is. It is perfectly appropriate to sing a song and feel good about that song. And just say, yeah, we did that for God. To go overseas and build a church or a mission trip and just feel good that you did something. It is okay to walk down the aisle at La Sierra University and get your degree and be triumphant. Yes. And have everyone high five you. Yes, you can feel good about achievements that you do by God's grace and by the glory of God and by talents God has given to us. And you feel good when you feel good about yourself, that you're dressed up, or that you've built a building, or you got some teeth fixed, and you got someone's thing situated, and you worked it out, and you made a wonderful dinner for your kids. It's okay to be proud legitimately for real things that come as a gift from God. But the feeling of pride is very close to that pure feeling of joy in legitimate pleasure and accomplishment. But it is a cheap knockoff of that real. It's of the same kind of thing. But you can never be satisfied with just that. To be satisfied with that would be like going to the Taj Mahal, we're going to do in a few months. But rather than going with the group into the Taj Mahal, you go over to the little gift shop and you buy postcards of the Taj Mahal. And you'll say, come on, here it is. No, I'm happy with these little postcards. And you're satisfied with the knockoff, the shadow of the pure. Or you go to the Eiffel Tower, but before you get to the Eiffel Tower, you buy the little key ring sold on the street. And you're satisfied with the little key ring of the Eiffel Tower, but not the Eiffel Tower. And God says, why would you be satisfied with this little feeling of pride when I am willing to give you this legitimate pleasure of the accomplishment for God when you do things for God? Well, what can we do about pride? Well, number one, I put down, it has to start with admitting that we have pride. Can you do it? C.S. Lewis says it is the one of these 7 deadly sins that usually we can see in everyone else except ourselves. There is a pastor who preached this year at our meetings in Austin, Texas. Gerald and I have known him for a long, long time. He's 73 today. He was a giant. I have tapes from him from 30, 40 years ago. He was fantastic. Don't need to know his name, doesn't matter. Gerald and I know. And at 50 years old, he made a terrible mistake. As a high church leader, speaking everywhere, camp meetings and everywhere, he was a union president or something, and he made a mistake. They had to put him out of ministry. He had to go a long time outside the ministry of the church. But over time, he worked it out, and he was accountable, and somebody gave him another chance. And now at 73 years old, he is pastoring a church in like Tacoma or someplace. And they brought him back to preach. First time I know of that he's preached in a huge place like that. Great sermon. 7,000 Adventist pastors. I'll never forget it as he says, at 29 I was youth director of my conference, whatever. At 39 I was a conference president. At 45 I was a union secretary. At 49 I was a union president. And at 50 I was a fool. Just said it. And he said I had to be broken down before I could be built back up. I was flying high. Pride goeth before a fall. But his healing had to start with admitting that he had issues. And he had to be broken and he had to be built back up. And he preached this powerful, anointed, honest sermon. First you have to own it and say, I also think about myself and worry what people think of me. And I also worry when I don't get what I think is rightfully mine, or someone else gets the credit instead of me. I do worry how I look. Yes, I do have some of those things. I do finish other people's stories. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay. It starts with that. We all have a little Nebuchadnezzar in us. Number 2, obviously the opposite of pride is humility. And I read a lot on this week. Humility is not putting yourself down, having low self-esteem, your worm theology, I'm nothing, I don't matter. It is not that. I tried to figure out who said it. The very famous quote sometimes is given to C.S. Lewis. Rick Warren seems to have said something like this. But here is the line: humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. Did you get it? That's all you take home with, that's worth it. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, putting yourself down. You are made in the image of God. Love your neighbor as yourself. It is important to feel good about who you are in God, but to think in an equal way with people. One person wrote this: it is okay to feel good about what is accomplished as long as you would feel just as good if someone else accomplished it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Interesting test. But if you're glad it was you that did it, be careful. Humility. How do you become more humble? Number 1, ask questions. Rather than being full of your own stories and talking about yourself, ask questions. What do you do? What about? And begin to be curious about other people. And begin to get out of your own skin. And you begin to be curious about other people. And they begin to know that you are an other-centered person because you ask questions and want to get them talking about themselves rather than always talking about yourself. Number 2, compliment people and tell them how terrific they are and how terrific what they did was. You know where it's hard? If you compliment people who do the same thing you do. If you think you have a pretty good chili dish and now compliment someone else for their chili, a little hard. Preachers have a hard time complimenting other preachers. Musicians have a hard time sometimes complimenting other people who do what they do. Compliment. That was terrific. You were great. And it gets you out of your pride into humility, others. And set yourself free from worrying all the time what other people think. What they will think about how you will look. How is this going to look? Or about the degrees after your name or whatever else. We used to tease my mother. She wouldn't let my father grow a beard. He grew a beard in China. And she was afraid that he would bump into some church members in China and here he would have a beard. I said, Mom, there's 1 billion people in China. Worried what people will think. At some point you have to set ourselves free and just say, I am going to live my life for God. Not worrying about what everyone else says. Number 3 is to serve. Somewhere to get involved with someone else. And it's one of the reasons I go on mission trips. I can spend 11 months of the year just preaching, and if you're not careful, you begin to think this and this and this. And then you go over there and you're doing a volcano cement mixing. And you're painting, and it's hot, and it's messy, and it's difficult, and you're giving away to someone else, and you're doing for someone else, and it just helps chip away at the pride that builds up in our soul. And there comes a time when you have to just serve, and it breaks down the pride that builds up. Did a wedding 2 weeks ago. Here we are at a $30 million house looking over the ocean at La Jolla. Incredible place. But the wedding went until the dark, and now it's already 8 o'clock, and no one's doing anything to clean up. And I thought, well, better start. And so Hilda and I began to put chairs away, began to clean up, and others began. One said, Petra, Dan, are you cleaning up? And pretty soon they began to help us. And in 30 minutes, it was all cleaned up. And it helps you put the pride away. And so I just challenge you to get involved in service. Whether it's putting chairs away, helping in the kitchen, helping with Pathfinders, helping with adventurers. We need people to come on Tuesday afternoons, 4 or 5 o'clock, and help move boxes of food. And we have little old ladies that just can't do that. And every week they are there trying to put all this food and making 50 bags of food for people. We don't have anyone who will lift the boxes in. I said, can you help us bring your kids over? We need a few people. And just come and serve for half an hour. And it chips away at the pride that builds up when you begin to have a spirit of service and making a difference for others. Number 4 has to be the cross. There is no pride at the cross. The whole point of the cross is you could not do it yourself, and you need a cross. If you could do it by yourself, then you don't need a cross. But the cross means that you could not. You failed. You just could not keep it together for your whole life and be perfect all the time, inside and out. You just couldn't do it. And the Bible says, no, not one is righteous. And you need Jesus. You cannot have pride at the cross. It is the opposite of pride. And we need Jesus for all of it. We bring 0%, and Jesus brings all of it. And so if you have a little battle with pride, then look at the cross. And the more we look at the cross and how much we needed the cross and how thankful we are, pride just begins to slip away. I used to have fun just looking at Michael Jordan in Chicago. Every time Michael Jordan would make a shot at the end of a game to win for another world championship, all the rest of the team, all these average players who were nothing without Michael Jordan, they would be all over the court and dancing. And all 20,000 people in there, and 8 million Chicago people, we just kind of were a little more proud than the rest of the world. We are the world champions. Didn't do a blessed thing. Happened to live in Chicago when Michael Jordan was there. But we get to be world champions, and that's what we have in Jesus. There's no pride. It's all Jesus. Amen? And can I go one step further? Hundreds of years ago, the main theological idea about the cross that someone wrote down, it has become the dominant theology, is that when we sin, it offends the honor of God. It comes out of the Middle Ages when they had lords and serfs and feudal lords and castles. And if somebody from another castle and another lord spoke about your lord, you were honor bound as a knight or a serf to go and fight and kill to defend the honor of your Lord. And a bishop wrote that down as the dominating way of why Jesus had to die, is that when God has people sin that he created, it is an offense to the honor of God. And it's heartbreaking to him, and someone has to die to satisfy the honor of God. But he didn't want anyone to die, and so he has Jesus come down, and Jesus dies, and finally there is blood, and God's honor is satisfied. And someone else wrote, says, I don't think God is worried about his honor. How can that be? How could the whole purpose of the cross be to destroy our pride in order to satisfy God's pride? Cannot. That is not the purpose of Jesus dying on the cross. It's to satisfy the hurt pride of God. Number 5. We are trying to match this next 7 weeks with every 7 deadly sins with a fruit of the Spirit. It's not a perfect match. Many schemes have been done over the last 2,000 years, and they have put the 7 deadly sins with many other virtues and so on. We wanted to have some fun with the fruits of the Spirit. Yes, humility is the opposite of pride, but ultimately the answer to pride is the first fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace. What's the first one? Love. You cannot love and have pride at the same time. Love pushes out pride. Pride pushes out love. They're mutually exclusive. And so if you would like to just break the power of pride in your life, ask God to channel fruit of the Spirit through you. And when you love people and you love God and you love whoever's there, pride will wash away. We're trying to match a certain fruit with every fruit of the Spirit. And there's no great rhyme and reason to this. We just chose one. But because strawberries are still in season and I wanted strawberry shortcake, today, the fruit of the Spirit of love, the fruit is strawberries. Other weeks, I'm going to pass out fruit to you. But this week, I'm not going to pass out strawberries. I don't want to mess up our church. But when you go outside, there will be strawberry shortcake for you. Amen? Where's the amen for that? People have been cutting strawberries all day to give you strawberry shortcake. We hope that every time you have a strawberry for the rest of your life, you remember what word? Love. Strawberry. Did you see a picture of them holding the strawberries in a heart? Did you see that? Don't forget that. Strawberry and love. And may love come into your life and wash pride away. Finally, number 6. Get filled with the glory of God. The most powerful force against our pride is not to somehow try to cut pride out. As if I'm going to somehow, by willpower and force, I'm going to cut pride out. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to slap my wrist every time. I am going to grit my teeth and get pride out of my life, and I am going to kill it. It will not work. You have to have Jesus on the cross. But ultimately, the only way pride will go is if you replace it with something bigger and more glorious than what you already are trying to celebrate. And when you celebrate something bigger, that pride just begins to go away. I spent a lot of time trying to think this through. You think you're pretty smart until you watch someone on Jeopardy who is a lot smarter than you. And your pride begins to go backwards. You may think you're a pretty good preacher until you hear one of the giants and you say, maybe not as good as that. You may think you're pretty good at basketball until you watch a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant and say, I guess I'm not in that category. I thought I had a pretty cool Toyota, pretty cool car, I saw like years ago, Sport GTS, until someone let me drive their Porsche. And my pride went away because it was replaced by something bigger. And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but it's a real story happened to me. I was pastoring Chicago, good-sized hospital church, biggest church in Illinois. And a lot of people seemed to appreciate what I did. One Sunday afternoon, Hilda and I went to the Phantom of the Opera. I had never been to an opera in my life. I had no idea what was coming. I had seen these little things on TV, in other languages with little words going across. No respect for that. But I had no idea what was coming when I watched Phantom of the Opera. We're sitting there downtown Chicago, way in the bleachers there. And all of a sudden, here comes this fantastic music. And these sets and drama and people acting and movement and story and plot line. And here comes an organ out of the ceiling down into the... Oh, I was completely mesmerized. 3 hours, Phantom of the Opera. And it was done. I walked out the door with Hilda and I said, I can never preach again. How does anybody, when they can have something like this, now come to a church and watch an old, white, bald man stand behind a pulpit and talk? Hopeless. And your pride goes away when it is covered by something that is so much more bigger and glorious. And the only hope you and I have to get a hold of our pride is when you get a vision of God and how incredible and magnificent God and the glory of God is. And if you are still fighting with pride, it is because you don't have a big enough picture of God. And if you and I want to get a hold of our pride, the only way is to just get a hold of who God is and get a bigger and bigger picture of the magnificence of God. And gradually, pride will slip away. So what is the great answer to pride is worship. And you stand up and you sing, I will exalt thee. I will exalt thee. You cannot feel pride when you are singing, I will exalt thee to God. Why will there be no pride in heaven? Because we will stand and exalt God for the rest of eternity. Amen? So we want to get rid of this pride in our lives, 7 deadly sins. But ultimately, we just want to give God His glory. The Bible talks about glory everywhere. Fear God and give glory to Him. The glory of the knowledge of God in the face of Christ. One writer I read said, you can do this little saying, just say the glory be to the Father, glory be to the Christ, glory be to the Holy Spirit, glory, glory. And keep giving God glory. And the pride will be only in God and in Jesus Christ, our salvation. You think what heaven is going to be like someday when all pride is gone. When no one ever worries about what someone else thinks. You will never worry about how you look. You will never worry about a bad hair day or no hair at all. You will never worry about what someone else said. You will never be offended. You will never worry about who talked longer in the story or who finished your joke punchline. We will never worry about any of it ever again. Only people who are wonderful servants of God and worshiping the glory and have a servant heart with each other forever. Forever. It starts here. Amen? Why can't it be here? We're going to just celebrate some of our officers. We know they're not all are here. Half of them are in the other service. But many of you have accepted one position or another. I'd like to invite our choir to come forward. We're going to sing a dedication song. But if you're in this list and you have a role in serving God and the church here, we'd like to invite you to stand where you are. Can you stand? Some of you, I know where you are. Please stand and just say, we have a role in our church. You are willing to serve Jesus somewhere. You're in kindergarten, you're in the potluck, you're making the 11ths, you're helping wash dishes, you're in Pathfinders, Adventurers, you're in our music. Somewhere you have a role. You're a deaconess, a deacon. We appreciate you serving in our church. Some of you, we'll have to come and ask you. And we're going to sing this song called Bless This House. The song starts with a house, a building and walls, but it ends up with the people. And God is building the house of God with the people that we have here.